Freedom. How can we define it? How can we explain what it is, what it feels like? There is a large group of people in America who have a different view of what freedom looks like. Many of them are in places of influence, using their status to promote real and lasting change. They believe the outdated ideals of the past are no longer best for our society. Times change. What is good for one generation isn't necessarily good for the next, right? Can we really listen to the philosophies of men who wore powdered wigs? The Constitution's an antique, and the radicals who are obsessed with keeping it are still clinging to God and their guns. This is the kind of backwards thinking that is holding back the forward evolution our society needs. It's time to enact lasting change in America, because there's a better way. Or is there? The line has been drawn in the sand. On one side is a group of young people, teachers, lawmakers, and various other laborers striving for the good of the collective, as outlined by Karl Marx. On the other side is a large group of people who believe in individual liberty and cherish the freedom in America above all other political ideals. Which side of the line are you on? Does it even matter? The line is drawn so deeply that there is no place to stand in the middle. Which is better? Collective mentality or individual freedom? When you look at the differences between the philosophies, I believe you will agree that the answer to that question is self-evident. When you want to learn more about a subject, you go to the source. For this documentary, I've sought out books, websites, and quotes from the actual founders and notable leaders of these movements. I skipped over the conspiracy theorist and searched for the truth. America's future is being shaped a little at a time to resemble the plan for society as outlined by Karl Marx, the founding father of communism. Nations all around the world have implemented the teachings of Karl Marx. They might call it communism, socialism, or Marxism, but many of the core values are still the same. I've heard supporters of Karl Marx say that he's a very misinterpreted man. They say his ideas have been maligned, and if the critics would simply read his writings, they would understand his benevolent heart towards the working class. As I read the Communist Manifesto from cover to cover, I didn't sense his compassion for the poor. I heard the ranting of an angry man who demonized rich and successful people. Marx devoted chapter after chapter of the Communist Manifesto to one simple point. Wealthy people are evil, so replace the capitalism that made them successful. He doesn't mention lifting the poor out of their poverty so they can enjoy a higher standard of living. The poor are still poor, but they're not supposed to care because there's nothing to compare it with. Karl Marx can set the record straight for us concerning communism in his own words. Karl Marx and his friend Friedrich Engels issued the Communist Manifesto in 1848. And Engels authored the Principles of Communism in 1847. As I read both documents, I tried to find defining statements that captured the essence of their ideology. The theory of the communists may be summed up in the single sentence: abolition of private property. We communists have been reproached with the desire of abolishing the right of personally acquiring property as the fruit of a man's own labor, which property is alleged to be the groundwork of all personal freedom, activity, and independence. Hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned property. According to their founding documents, communists want to take every single hard-earned possession you own in this world and donate it to the betterment of the collective. Marx even acknowledges that working hard to make something of yourself and enjoying the fruit of your labor is the groundwork for independence. He is completely right. There is a significant feeling of freedom when you work hard, budget your money, buy your own home, drive your own car, plant your own garden, and don't take on more debt than you can handle. So why would communists want to take away your right to own property? Are you willing to give it up peacefully if they came to your front porch tomorrow? Engels knew that most people enjoy the possessions they earned by the sweat of their brow. Principles of Communism, number 17. In all probability, the proletarian revolution will transform existing society gradually and will be able to abolish private property only when the means of production are available in sufficient quantity. So how will this gradual change in policy take place? Here are just some of the ways. Principles of Communism, number 18. Limitation of private property through progressive taxation, heavy inheritance taxes, abolition of inheritance through collateral lines like brothers, nephews, etc., forced loans, progressive taxation, heavy inheritance taxes. Am I still reading 1848 Marx or the modern-day United States tax code? Is it evil to love your children and want them to have the house you built with your own hands or the wealth you spent 40 years earning? Gradual expropriation of industrialists, partly through competition by state industry. Confiscation of the possessions of all immigrants and rebels against the majority of the people. Organization of labor or employment of proletarians on publicly owned land, in factories and workshops, with competition among the workers being abolished. And with the factory owners, insofar as they still exist, being obliged to pay the same high wages as those paid by the state. Healthy competition would also be abolished. Everyone does their equal amount of work for the good of the collective and forgets the individual concept of competition. No one improves himself for a raise or management position because everyone gets paid an equal amount of money. Nothing. Because communists want to abolish all privately owned wealth. But don't worry, you can lay your head on your pillow each night knowing your work helped the collective. The work you did contributed to your state-issued food and communal apartment. You can lay on your state-issued bed in your state-issued pajamas, all in lovely equal shades of gray, and be thankful that your work also contributed to your coworker who's a lazy bum and has no motivation to work for the precious collective. Have you ever worked for a company that didn't have at least one lazy worker? Education of all children from the moment they can leave their mother's care in national establishments at national cost. Mother, you actually thought that baby in your arms belongs to you? Your old-fashioned ideas are laughable. Don't you know that children belong to the collective? Construction on public lands of great palaces as communal dwellings for associated groups of citizens. Concentration of all means of transportation in the hands of the nation. Okay, let's summarize these principles. All agriculture, industry, transportation, money, and education belongs to this giant government who controls every minute piece of our lives, but provides us with care from cradle to grave. Karl Marx also said, "Religion is the opium of the people." He compared religion to an addictive drug that will lead to your downfall, as all drugs do. Religion for many cultures is the glue that adheres them to a set of moral values. Anyone who holds himself to a higher standard of values should be encouraged. When people kill in the name of religion, it's only an artificial excuse of holiness to an unjust and unholy cause. Sometimes wars have to be fought in self-defense or to rid the world of grave injustice. But to kill innocents in the name of God goes against the very essence of all things pertaining to religion, morality, and spirituality. Christians and other people of faith should not be put on trial for the crimes of a heinous few whose views are in stark contrast with their own. Karl Marx didn't appreciate the Bible because it's so full of absolutes and eternal truths. He wrote, "There are besides eternal truths, such as freedom, justice, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience." Do you understand people who want to abolish religion and every public display of faith? I'm not Jewish, but I wouldn't be offended if a predominantly Jewish town had a Star of David on their town hall. It wouldn't offend me in the least. I'm not a Buddhist, but I wouldn't feel in any way threatened if a Buddhist in my subdivision put a religious statue in their front yard. Karl Marx also called for the abolition of the family. Abolition of the family, even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communist. The bourgeois claptrap about the family and education, about the hallowed correlation of parents and child, becomes all the more disgusting, the more, by the action of modern industry, all the family ties among the proletarians are torn asunder, and their children transformed into simple articles of commerce and instruments of labor. Marx believed the family only exists because of financial reasons. Children have to live with parents and need their care to survive. But under communism, the children are taken from the family during infancy to be raised in national institutions. Children are not the property of the parents. They belong to the collective. Marx thought women married men because they felt the need for a protector and breadwinner. Under communism, women are equal to men in social status. Anyone who knows anything of history knows that great social changes are impossible without feminine upheaval. Social progress can be measured exactly by the social position of the fair sex, the ugly ones included. Today's feminists should be careful about jumping on the equal wages, equal treatment bandwagon. Consider what we have to lose to gain equal status. If I carry myself in a feminine manner, I have found men more likely to open doors for me, let me go first, and have the most comfortable seat. If men treated me equally, I would lose my feeling of royalty. If you read a detailed biography about Karl Marx, you'll begin to understand why he was so angry with the rich. Though some of you are diametrically opposed to everything Karl Marx advocated, you will most likely find yourself feeling sorry for him. His madness was driven by his own poverty. He was expelled from Germany and France because of his radical ideas. He settled his wife and children in England, where they lived as refugees, under horrible conditions. Marx worked as a journalist, but was never able to earn enough money to make a living for his family. He was never successful at anything. Marx never understood freedom and self-reliance because he was in continuous debt and had to pawn all of his material possessions. He barely kept food on the table, let alone nutritious meals. Marx had to endure the pain of losing 3 children because of their living conditions and his inability to make enough money to care for his family. He relied heavily on the support of Friedrich Engels to pay some of his debts. I think everyone would say they feel sympathetic towards another man's emotional grief and sufferings. It's easy to understand why Marx would rant against the rich who didn't suffer as he did. But should these rantings be used as the basis for American government? Should his philosophies be taught as sacred ideals in our colleges? Which side of the line are you on? Communists hate capitalism, free enterprise, and personal freedom. What is so evil about man taking the initiative to start a business? Many small business owners in America started out with nothing, took the risk, and provided a good or service the public considered worthy of purchase. Maybe the owner invented a machine that made work more efficient, hired more people, and created more jobs because of the increase in demand. The people working under him soon earn enough money to put a down payment on a car or hire someone to repair their roof. The business owner becomes so successful that he expands the business into other towns, creates more jobs, and even donates a little to charity. The wealth that originated from his business trickles down until it helps all aspects of the economy. That business will keep on growing unless American politicians decide to do something crazy like increase the corporate tax rate to 40%. Oh wait, that's exactly what they did. Corporations in return move their production to China, whose corporate tax rate is only 25%. The average corporate tax rate across the globe is 22.96%. It's difficult to have a thriving business when your success is punished with one of the highest tax rates in the world, strict regulations, and increasing fees for transportation, etc. What would you do if your business couldn't survive on the remaining 60% of your earnings? Would you downsize by shutting down facilities and stopping your growth? Would you move your business overseas? Would you anger your customers by shifting the price burden on their shoulders? No matter what corporations do, they'll be demonized by the communists who hate them unless they pump millions of dollars into campaigns and agendas that implement the principles of Karl Marx. They hate rich CEOs unless they are also rich campaign donors. The only way we have of looking into the future is to learn what shaped the past. Many nations have tried forms of Marxism, communism, and socialism. Each leader adds his own flavor to the mix, but the same general principles are at the core. Joseph Stalin was the socialist leader of the Soviet Union. He gained power after the death of Lenin in 1924. He was more ruthless than Lenin. Stalin's version of socialism had a giant central government, correctional labor camps, and agendas like the Great Purge that executed hundreds of thousands of people. He believed controlling the production and distribution of food would greatly aid him in controlling the people. Under his reign, a group of farmers in the Ukraine were self-reliant and used to independence. Naturally, he had to stop this threat to his power. The farmers who refused to give up their crops and homes were killed or sent to remote regions like Siberia. Some of the farmers burned their homes and killed their own livestock so as not to give them to the socialists. Stalin increased industry through forced labor and started collective farming. His agriculture plans didn't turn out very well, leading to a mass starvation and contributing to the Soviet famine of 1932. Stalin's leadership led to many atrocities, such as the joint effort with Germany to damage Poland. An article in the Chicago Tribune tells of the Katyn Forest, where Stalin's secret police murdered over 21,000 Polish military officers, intellectuals, priests, doctors, and Boy Scouts. in the spring of 1940. Many women and children were transported to camps in Siberia in cattle cars. A Soviet novelist named Aitmatov tells the account of Stalin and the chicken. Stalin stood before his men that were questioning whether or not people would submit to their tyrannical rule. He picked up a chicken and started painfully plucking out its feathers. When the last feather was out, he set the chicken down and grabbed a handful of crumbs. Even though he brutally plucked the chicken, it still came close to him and stayed at the foot of his boots to eat the crumbs. Stalin was trying to prove a point before his men that it's possible to hold overbearing control over human lives as long as you were in charge of distributing their food. Mao Zedong came into power in China during the 1940s. He was known as the chairman of the Communist Party of China. In 1958, he started the Great Leap Forward, a plan that moved people into large communes, banned private farming, and forced laborers into large metal production projects. During the Great Leap Forward, the communes were forced to use new farming techniques that were very unsuccessful. This led to one of the worst accounts of mass starvation of all time. Entire villages starved to death. But Mao had nothing to fear because the critics of the failed forward leap were all murdered or sent to labor camps. Historians argue over how many people were killed under the rule of Chairman Mao. Their estimates range between 49 to 78 million people. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un have all succeeded each other as the supreme leader of North Korea. Satellite images have revealed the prison labor camps and ever-expanding mass graves to accommodate all the bodies of people who die in the camps. In North Korea, even punishment is collective. If one family member is caught risking his life to get out of the country, his entire family will be punished and sent to work in the camps until they die. This dictator family has been so successful in absolute brainwashing that most people hold their political system as a sacred religion. The few who have escaped North Korea tell of stories of horrible atrocities, starvation, and torture. Pol Pot was a leader in the Cambodian communist movement. He killed off approximately 20% of the population of Cambodia as he sought to weed out all who opposed him. He wanted to purify Cambodian society of capitalism, religion, and the influence of the Western way of life. Pol Pot set up killing fields and mass graves that held thousands of bodies all lumped on top of one another. And what list of evil dictators who were the embodiment of evil would be complete without mentioning Hitler? I will not go into great detail because we already know the horrors of the Nazis. Each of these ruthless dictators had their own unique political views, but they had a lot of common goals and tactics. Most of their views line up perfectly with the writings of Karl Marx, and they all slaughtered millions of people. Capitalism can be changed into socialism, which can then evolve into communism. Communism always says that democracy is at its heart. The majority rules and the people get exactly what they want. However, everywhere it has been tried, a tyrannical dictator has set himself up as the central ruler. It may start with a non-intrusive committee to follow the orders of the majority, but someone always takes the committee by force and begins to commit atrocities. These dictators think they know what is best for society. They act on what is best for the collective and their own need for power. If an individual wants to make a decision on his own, his voice is silenced by regulation or by death. The collective doesn't seem to care if a few individuals die if it helps the collective advance. They place no value on life or other individual rights. They think people are too stupid to make the right decisions for themselves, so the dictators will do it for them. Every time communism has been implemented, it has massively failed and resulted in many unnecessary millions of deaths. Collective farming has resulted time after time in mass starvation. It always leads to concentration camps, mass slayings of the educated religious and minority groups. Children are the property of the state and turn into brainwashed robots. The government runs every part of society. Freedom of speech and freedom to worship God are gone. At first, communism sounds like a utopia. Everyone happily works for the state, who in turn provides all their food, housing, healthcare, and education. I'm sure the handout crowd thinks it's great to have all of your needs given to you by the government. Bring on the government cell phones and food stamps. But at what cost? As time goes on, we will see this principle carried out. If you live under my roof, you will live by my rules. More and more, the United States will regulate our lives. If people rely on government health care, the government will not be able to afford all the expenses related to problems like obesity. They will restrict what we can eat and mandate exercise. The nanny state will become so intrusive that our privacy and freedoms will be squeezed out of existence. It's already starting. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy to see my tax dollars at work if someone legitimately needs assistance. I truly care for these people and want them to be comfortable. But I have no sympathy for someone who is able to work but lacks the integrity to take care of themselves. Government handouts become government prison. Once socialism evolves into communism, there doesn't seem to be any room for people who receive government assistance but don't work. Under communism, everyone has to pull their weight to produce enough goods to supply a nation. The question begs to be asked, what about people who are not able to pull their own weight? The lame, the blind, what happens to them? Eugenics, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a science that deals with the improvement, as by control of human mating, of hereditary qualities of race or breed. Eugenicists believe human evolution can be perfected by controlling who can and cannot have children. They want to purge society of people who cost more than they can contribute, or those who decrease the average intelligence of the collective. It's their job to promote the Darwinian concept of natural selection. If you don't share their scientific and political ideals, you're guilty of the worst crime against humanity, holding back human evolution. Many see eugenics as the end of poverty, mental illness, and hereditary diseases. They say it's unfair to associate true scientific eugenics with Hitler and the communists who murdered millions in the name of eugenics. They claim the practice of eugenics is humanitarian. Though many eugenicists condemn the actions of communist dictators, they are still seeped with Marxist collectivism. Eugenicists will criticize Hitler in one article for trying to kill an entire race of people because he thought they were genetically inferior. Then, in another article, they will use IQ test results to say some races are inferior. They want to stop societies from declining because unintelligent women are having more children than intelligent women. Eugenicists want to rid society of disease and unintelligent people by preventing births among those who suffer in these conditions. Their methods have some undesirable consequences. Statistics and tests will prove that some people are smarter than others and certain groups of people are more prone to disease or ailments. But you can't lump people together and say that every member of that group is inferior and should be given permanent birth control. This is looking at the collective and not the individual. At the Third International Eugenics Conference in New York in 1932, they stated several basic principles for population control that are summarized here. Birth control through the methods of sterilization of the undesirables, use of contraception and abortion, euthanasia for the sick and old, establishing a 1 or 2 child policy for appropriate countries, promotion of abstinence for the poorer classes, state-educated family planning organizations, restrictions on international migrations, environmental protection laws, and the promotion of conservationism, which led to the Green Movement. Marion Van Court wrote The Case for Eugenics in a Nutshell, an article published in the winter 2004 issue of the Occidental Quarterly. She makes a very humanitarian case for modern scientific eugenics. One of the driving points in the article is her desire to improve the human condition. On the surface, she has some good ideas. She explains real problems in our American society, which few would disagree. However, her solutions to these problems could very well result in a frightening scenario. If the retarded were given sufficient cash or other incentives to adopt permanent birth control, mental retardation could be cut by approximately 1/3 in just one generation. A few questions arise. Who determines which people are intelligent enough to have children? And who gets permanently sterilized? What if a mentally handicapped woman refuses the permanent birth control? Does the government force her for the good of the collective? Do Americans trust their president or future presidents with that kind of power? I recently read another article that was titled, Conservative or Liberal? It may be in the genes. Researchers are trying to prove that social attitudes can be inherited. If evolutionists think the conservatives are holding back humanity, will they use eugenics to purge the so-called conservative gene? Again, I wouldn't trust any liberal or conservative with that decision-making power. There are better solutions than eugenics to solve the problems of the human condition. First, we need to restore the emphasis on morality. We should encourage abstinence instead of free birth control. It can't be accepted anymore for men and women to have a different partner every night and spread disease like wildfire. After morality is restored, capitalism can flourish. Capitalism is only at its best in a moral society. Trickle-down capitalism has lifted more people out of squalor and poverty than any other form of government economics. By lifting people out of poverty, we can rid the world of more disease and inhumane living conditions. We absolutely have to stop able-bodied people from living on welfare. Welfare only keeps people in the slums and dumbs them down by destroying all incentives for them to improve their condition. I think it's better to eliminate poverty by lifting people out of it than gradually killing them off through eugenics, forced birth control, or purges. If you think we need to rid the world of uneducated people, then throw your time and resources into better ways of educating them, not killing them. Man is the real miracle, the real God, and he has proven it for 1,000 generations. All that is science or religion comes from him and is less than him. The purpose of life is the evolution of man toward perfection. Abortion was promoted by the same people who promoted eugenics. Ever heard of Margaret Sanger? This little darling of a lady was the very embodiment of womanhood and saintly domesticity. She looked so sweet as she addressed the members of the Ku Klux Klan at one of their little social gatherings. She performed so well, she received several more invitations for upcoming rallies. Margaret Sanger was anything but a lady. She wanted to have as many partners as she could without being constantly pregnant. As a member of the American Eugenics Society, she also wanted to stop people she deemed unfit from reproducing. She believed the communists were right in their endeavor to extinguish all notions of traditional marriage. Her favorite philosophy was to have relations with anybody, anything, anytime, at any age. So let's find ways to limit pregnancies. Her other favorite philosophy was to give birth control to minority groups so they would eventually die out over time. And she could quote, "Prevent multiplication of this bad stock. Birth control must lead ultimately to a cleaner race." In 1939, she wrote a letter to Dr. Clarence Gable that outlined some plans on how to use black ministers to get their people to use birth control to limit their population. "We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members." Dr. Alveda King is the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. While giving a speech at a pro-life group, she talked about abortionists who plant their killing centers in minority neighborhoods and prey upon women who think they have no hope. Abortion has done what the Klan only dreamed of. Abortion doctors have killed millions more than the KKK lynched. Both groups should have been stopped from their killing sprees before they ever got started. It was the hard work of Margaret Sanger that founded Planned Parenthood and established its guiding principles. Planned Parenthood has performed well over 6 million abortions. Since 1964, they have received $6.82 billion of taxpayers' money to help them in their sinister deeds. I don't believe they were founded to improve women's health or to help women plan their parenthood. It was all about limiting the population, killing off the unfit, and targeting minority groups. Planned Parenthood's curriculum is being used in schools all across America to teach children of all ages. I've read the testimonies of real parents whose 10-year-old child was stripped of her innocence as she learned about sexual acts that should not be exposed to any young child. The graphic images in the curriculum are borderline pornographic, and the lessons encourage teens to lose their purity, experiment with their bodies, and explore different sexual orientations. The schools give our teens protection and say, "Go ahead, act like animals, do what you want to, throw morality under the bus, lose your innocence." What a way to devalue the life of a teen, especially young girls, who are devalued to the point of being nothing more than a pinup on the wall. Young people today are so dark. Their emotions, their music, their clothing, their language, everything has a dark, hopeless emptiness. Thanks, Margaret Sanger, for founding an organization that has helped in the downfall of our teens. The communists would be so proud of you for breaking down the traditional family. Communism, eugenics, abortion, racism, they all go hand in hand. So far, we've spent a lot of time working through the communism of the past. But what about today? Where is communism and what does it look like in modern times? First, remember that every leader or politician puts their own flavor into the mix of communism. The issues change over time, but the common thread of communism lies in its foundational principles. They've been fairly consistent and easily recognizable. You see a lot of communism and socialism scattered all over Europe and many other regions. Issues like universal health care, government grants for education, and other government freebies have bankrupted most of Europe. When the government no longer has the money to keep up with its social programs, the people take to the streets and protest. Protests in Spain, Greece, the UK, and many other European countries have not ended well. As they clash with riot police, people have been injured and killed. Buildings were set on fire and looters had a field day. Homeless people now roam the streets and the wealthy are fleeing to more stable countries. Europe as a whole is a dismal sight. No one can say their socialism is thriving. There are also long waiting lists for people needing medical care. This is also true of Canada. There are tons of protests going on around the world as people are waking up to find their government benefits decreasing. Other protests are trying to overturn corrupt leadership. Because of these protests, the world is literally on fire. In America, we had the Occupy movement in all the major cities. If you think all these protests are unrelated, then take a moment to stop and smell the roses. If you spot the flags and hear the chants in the crowds, you will find several common themes like "Workers of the World Unite," a phrase penned by Karl Marx straight out of the Communist Manifesto. The college students were complaining that they couldn't pay off their huge student loans. They were actually mad at the big bankers for not writing off their loan and saying, "You poor student, consider your $50,000 debt paid. We owe it to you." People who lost their homes were mad at the banks for putting their homes in foreclosure. How dare those big banks actually demand people pay off their loan payments? How unfair to those poor people who willingly took the loan knowing exactly what their payments would be. No one forced them to get a loan that they couldn't afford. The Occupy crowd openly admits to being communistic and wanting cradle-to-grave government assistance and freebies. Modern politicians in America are just the opposite. They usually don't like to call themselves communist, socialist, Marxist, or radical revolutionaries because of the negative connotation it would cast on their campaigns. Some are surprisingly open about their true agendas, but most call themselves by a nicer sounding name, such as progressives. Progressives gained popularity in the early 20th century in America. Together with their European socialist friends, they thought of wonderful ways of implementing eugenics by building a better race. Hitler got some of his best ideas from this school of thought, including gas chambers for the unfit. George Bernard Shaw subscribed to this mentality as well. You remember his famous writings, but have you ever heard his quote on killing certain members of society? You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. Just put them there and say, "Sir," or "Madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence?" If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight, and since you won't, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the organizations of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive. Because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself. This quote is from a video of Shaw you can watch on YouTube. do your own research. I've included links at the end of this video to various sources you can visit yourself to prove their validity. Please don't take my word or anyone's word for it. Go see the evidence for yourself. I would have loved to have included the actual videos in this DVD, but I can't obtain the copyrights to them. You can visit the blog, thetruthisselfevident.blogspot.com, and see some of these videos in the research section. Here's another darling quote from Shaw. "The Nazi movement is in many respects one which has my warmest sympathy." I went to progressiveliving.org to read extensively about their beliefs. On their website, they stated, many of the issues of concern to progressives 50 or 100 years ago remain just as important today. I chuckled at the statement because progressives have tried to silence conservatives and Christians by mocking their long-held convictions. Timeless principles are mocked as being out of date, but their principles, they say, span the test of time. Just another radical tactic. Mock your enemies into silence. The website also discussed the 4 stages in progressive history. The common elements among the 4 have included a focus on social reforms intended to improve the quality of life for the ordinary working person, a concern for the socially and politically destructive effects of excessive corporate power, suspicion of the economic motivations underlying much of U.S. foreign policy, and efforts to protect and preserve nature. This proves that progressives follow the communistic teaching of power to the workers, hate successful corporations, and go green. The progressive sons didn't fall far from the communist tree. Why is going green so important to them? I think some people truly care about the environment and believe all the nonsense about climate change, but most are just using it as another way to control our lives and add endless regulations. More and more scientists are rejecting the claims of global warming. The name has changed from global warming to climate change because their early estimates of rising global temperatures were completely wrong. Now, if there's a snowstorm, it's climate change. If there's an earthquake, it's climate change, despite the fact that these events have been occurring since the beginning of time. Commercials and Earth Day events are so convincing that everyone is on the Go Green bandwagon. However, evidence is pointing to the contrary. The internet is full of warnings about the rising sea levels and our disappearing beaches. The National Wildlife Federation warns, fishing as we know it could disappear in a matter of decades, says Manly Fuller, president of the Florida Wildlife Federation. Our coastal habitats are shrinking, and if we lose our coastal fisheries to rising seas, the effect on fish and wildlife Floridians have worked so hard to protect will be devastating. I read an article from the University of Florida about coastal engineering professor Bob Dean, who researched the beaches of Florida. Here is a quote from that article. Among the most significant of their findings is that beaches on Florida's east coast are increasing in size, on average at the rate of about 4 inches each year. So which is it? So are the beaches shrinking or expanding? Who do we believe? Controlling government propagandists or an actual coastal engineer? Progressives think that men are sheep that need to be herded in the right direction. The super-educated elites guide the masses in making decisions they just couldn't make on their own. And the progressives are so patient. They are willing to wait for years for their ideas to come to fruition. They've lived up to their name as they work for decades to pass one law at a time to progress towards their goals. They've worked their ideas into our culture one step at a time until America was transformed and nobody saw it coming. We are waking up and saying, what happened to our country? I don't recognize it anymore. What happened to my free speech? Where is the free press who will cover the hard issues? Where is the truth? Where is my freedom? The progressives have been successful in their journey to transform American values and silence their critics. They have used tactics like Saul Alinsky wrote about in his book, Rules for Radicals. Saul Alinsky dedicates this little gem of a book to Lucifer, the first radical. Plenty of today's political leaders call themselves progressives or admit to idolizing progressive heroes from the past. But folks on the far left get aggravated at the politicians because they're not progressive enough. They want their leaders to do far more to destroy capitalism by imposing more regulations to stifle corporate growth. This is another way the green movement comes in handy. If you raise energy prices and force businesses to follow green guidelines, you can regulate them right out of business. Their answer to every problem is more government. But the government can't keep itself straight as it is. Progressives have changed our language to make their most controversial issues more palatable. They can't call anything by its real name or they lose their supporters. Murdering babies is women's reproductive health or her right to choose. Infringing on our right to bear arms is called gun safety. Granting a free pass for illegal aliens to come to our country and get government assistance provided by hardworking taxpayers is called immigration reform. Our fledgling economy, decreasing value of the dollar, and huge unemployment rates are called economic recovery. Welfare is called an entitlement. The website aeideas.org has some interesting statistics on welfare. There are now just 1.65 employed persons in private sector per one person on welfare assistance. And since 2001, food stamp enrollment has increased by over 158%. That doesn't really sound like we're moving forward, as President Obama's slogan so proudly claimed. The word forward has been used in many communist movements around the globe. Remember Mao's Great Leap Forward? It didn't end well. Also, MSNBC, the news network for communist propaganda, has a slogan, Lean Forward. Let's go through some quotes by American officials who show off their collective roots. Anita Dunn, the White House Communications Director, was speaking at a high school graduation at the Washington National Cathedral in 2009 when she said, "The third lesson and tip actually come from two of my favorite political philosophers, Mao Zedong and Mother Teresa, not often coupled with each other." The Department of Education used a quote by Mao for their quote of the day on their website for children. They later removed the quote after a huge backlash. Hillary Clinton spoke about her love for eugenicist Margaret Sanger when she said, "I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. When I think about what she did all those years ago in Brooklyn, taking on archetypes, taking on attitudes and accusations flowing from all directions, I am really in awe of her." President Obama said, "If you've got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen." This shows the collective mentality that no individual can be successful by their own hard work and determination. He also wants the rich to pay their fair share of income taxes. The rich are already paying income taxes out their nose, and they're punished for no other reason than just being rich. There are a lot of wealthy, successful Americans who agree with me because they want to give something back. They know they didn't. Look, If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. If a lot of wealthy Americans want to give something back, then by all means, let them write monthly checks to the U.S. Treasury. Nothing is stopping them from giving back as much as they want to. Tell them to pay my share too. Why do the rich have to pay their fair share? They're not the ones who recklessly spent the government's money in the first place. Many news commentators are getting bold in their progressive views. Melissa Harris Perry, during a promo for MSNBC. We have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to their communities. Kids belong to the collective, not their parents. Someone's been reading Marx. Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC's Morning Joe. Glenn, unlike you, I am not a progressive. I am not a liberal who is so afraid of the word that I have to change my name to progressive. Liberals amuse me. I am a socialist. I live to the extreme left of you mere liberals. It's not just the media and politicians who are collective commies. Our schools and colleges are full of them. Do you remember hearing about the Weathermen Underground? They were a group of communist revolutionaries who set off several bombs at police stations, the Pentagon, and the U.S. Capitol building. The group was founded in the late 1960s by Bill Ayers. His wife, Bernadine Dorn, and Kathy Boudin were also key players in the Weathermen Underground. Some of the members were on the FBI's most wanted list. Some have served in jail, paid fines, or finished probation. They weren't freedom fighters, they were terrorists. 3 Weathermen Underground members were killed while making a bomb for a dance at an army base. When you feel you have right on your side, you can do some pretty horrific things. Former Weathermen member Brian Flanagan. Bernadine Dorn is an associate professor and director at Northwestern University's Children and Justice Center. Mark Rudd teaches at a junior college in New Mexico. Bill Ayers married Dorn, and he is currently a school reform activist and professor of education at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Kathy Boudin is a professor at Columbia University. When Marxists become terrorists and feel right at home working in our universities, something is wrong. The Weathermen Underground found out they could be a lot more effective in changing America by indoctrinating our children, instead of blowing up buildings. Progressives have infiltrated every aspect of our education system by becoming school teachers, college professors, and curriculum writers. Even President Obama admits that Marxist professors are in our schools. He chose them carefully to be his friends. On page 100 of President Obama's book, Dreams from My Father, he wrote, "To avoid being mistaken for a sellout, I chose my friends carefully. The more politically active black students, the foreign students, the Chicanos, the Marxist professors, and structural feminists and punk rock performance poets." Why are there so many Marxists in our schools? They have a deep-rooted passion that drives them to advance their cause. They learned that if you want to change a culture, you start with the children. Communists can't destroy capitalism because too many people know it has lifted more people out of squalor than any other political system on the planet. You can't control someone who is educated about the Constitution and knows their God-given rights. You have to start with the kids and brainwash them into believing a bucket of lies. If natural rights are self-evident, they can only be eliminated by 14 years of intense propaganda. That's our preschool through 12th grade system. So how do we stop it? How do we take our country back to a time when freedom was cherished and morality ruled the day. There will always be darkness in the world, but how do we get the light to shine so bright that the darkness is forced into hiding? How do we get to the shore where brilliant rays of freedom streak across the sky with bursts of hope and explosions of individual liberty? And as the smoke settles and the fog lifts and the dawn breaks its morning light, we see, like Francis Scott Key, that the flag is still there. The stars and stripes are a beacon of hope to the oppressed and persecuted people of the world. We are the last safe haven for those who wish to escape tyranny. At the base of the Statue of Liberty, we read Emma Lazarus's poem, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." I want people to come through the front door to experience our freedom and make something better for their families. But make sure they come through the front door, not illegally through a tunnel under the U.S. and Mexican border. The best thing an American can do to help this country is learn from the history of the past and read our founding documents. If you don't know your rights, you can lose them. Communists hope that you don't actually read the supreme law of the land. They know you'll see the brilliance of our simply stated rights, and it will make it so difficult for them to take it all away. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. The timeless principles of our founding documents are based in natural law. These are the same timeless principles of the Bible. They are self-evident. You could burn the Constitution, but natural law has already been seared into the hearts of men. Laws of nature and of nature's God are eternal, universal, and easily understood. The biblical commandments are a logical set of rules that everyone should strive to follow. Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, treat others like you want to be treated. Even an atheist would agree that those are good general rules to follow. They are simple, universal truths that have stood the test of time. A constitution would not be effective if it was not based in anything except natural law that is established and governed by God. I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings, that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every person has the right to live. Every life should be valued as a sacred gift from the Creator. Every person has the right to be free of tyranny and oppression. In the original draft of the Declaration, the pursuit of happiness was not included. The original sentence represented the original intent of the founders: life, liberty, and property. The pursuit of happiness is to be able to own your own stuff. This goes against the core of communism, which seeks to abolish private property ownership. Under the Constitution and natural law, you can pursue your own happiness and enjoy the possessions you have earned or inherited. Notice it doesn't say anything about you being entitled to free stuff from the government. Today we work hard for our own happiness, only to have our property taken from us to support people who don't want to work. The phrase, "all men are created equal," is different from the word equality. Today the government is trying to convince us that income inequality needs to be eradicated. That's not the government's job. We're not promised income equality, but an equal opportunity to succeed in life regardless of race or status. Our Constitution has proven itself to be a superior document because of its amazing longevity. By our estimate, national constitutions have lasted an average of only 17 years since 1789. This is an unsettling estimate of life expectancy for a document whose basic function is to express guiding national principles, establish basic rules, and limit the power of government, all of which presuppose constitutional longevity. The Bill of Rights has truly set America apart from other nations. Thousands of men in thousands of cities have longed for these rights, died for these rights, and dreamed of having these rights, but we take them for granted. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom to peacefully assemble. These rights are logical, they make sense, and they are self-evident. You don't have to tell someone they have a right to voice their opinions, it just comes natural. And when a person sees an injustice, it is only natural for them to speak out and say, "This isn't right." The Bill of Rights makes sense. Communism doesn't make sense. And all the politicians who are trying to take us down the road to communism and trying to get people hooked on government handouts like drugs should take a look at Europe. Socialism rules the day in Europe. The unemployment rate in Spain is 25% and 26% in Greece. People have taken to the streets in violent protest because these politicians can't afford to continue giving out free stuff. Socialism is completely unsustainable. It isn't logical. Freedom of religion has been under unprecedented attack in recent years. A minority of atheists have tried to stamp out all public displays of religion. In 1892, the U.S. Supreme Court declared that America is, in fact, a Christian nation, and cited dozens of examples from other cases in historical documents. This was the final decision of the Church of the Holy Trinity versus the United States in 1892. Supreme Court Justice David Brewer said this about the decision: "I have said enough to show that Christianity came to this country with the first colonists and has been powerfully identified with its rapid development, colonial and national, and today exists as a mighty factor in the life of the Republic. This is a Christian nation. The calling of this Republic a Christian nation is not a mere pretense, but a recognition of an historical, legal, and social truth." Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren agreed with the decision, I believe the entire Bill of Rights came into being because of the knowledge of our forefathers had of the Bible and their belief in it. Freedom of belief, of expression, of assembly, of petition, the dignity of the individual, the sanctity of the home, equal justice under the law, and the reservation of powers to the people. I like to believe we are living today in the spirit of the Christian religion. I also like to believe that as long as we do so, no great harm can come to our country. In America, every man is free to worship God according to the dictates of his own heart. So even if he chooses not to worship God at all, he is free to follow his own beliefs. The modern progressives claim they are for diversity. They say they love diversity, but they should clarify that they only love you if you are diverse. If you fit their mold for what they consider to be traditional, then your rights are trampled on and you don't deserve to exist. Under the guise of tolerance, they want to eliminate the majority of Americans who are white, middle-class, Christian, and heterosexual. They're only tolerant of your diversity and worthy of their attention if you are poor or bisexual or transgender or a different skin color or a Muslim or an atheist. Or if you perfectly fit their mold and believe just like them. The thought police have already started forcing business owners to attend diversity classes. It's only a matter of time before progressives realize, hey, wouldn't it be easier if we just rounded up all the white Christian heterosexuals and put them in re-education camps so they can learn to be tolerant and diverse just like us? They would never go to Italy and force the predominantly Catholic population to tone down their public displays of Catholicism so as not to offend a few atheists. Nor would they go to a predominantly Muslim country and ask them to pray silently because a Jew is passing through the area and they might hurt his feelings. But they don't mind speaking out in America, which is a predominantly Christian nation, and ask them to sit down and shut up and hide their right to worship God. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's been a huge debate on gun control in America. Communists don't want people to have the freedom to defend themselves against killers, burglars, and rapists. It's hard to control people who are self-reliant and have the confidence that they can hold their own. Criminals will always find guns or weapons somewhere. So the best answer is to arm law-abiding citizens to even the ratios and teach our kids to have a healthy respect for guns while shunning the dark, violent culture of R-rated movies and gangster video games. Maybe I just missed it, but in all the gun control debates I have watched on the major networks, I have never heard one person actually quote the entire Second Amendment. The Marxists, of course, want you to think that you are too ignorant to understand the language of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We have to read the document for ourselves to see how our founders put it in plain and simple English. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So just by reading it, we can understand that we have the right to own arms, not just pistols or shotguns or semi-automatic rifles. These rights shall not be infringed or limited in any way. We are the people, or the citizens of the United States, and it is necessary that we are trained in the use of firearms to defend ourselves and to add to the security of our nation. What country would send an army to attack another country where all of its citizens are well armed and ready to defend their turf? No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Edward Snowden and others blew the whistle that the NSA can and does illegally hack into citizens' phones and data and computers without obtaining the proper warrants. The government can be inside your home as they hack into your cell phone. How is that different than quartering soldiers in your home or doing warrantless searches? When people educate themselves on the truth, it makes it easy to spot a lie. When a politician writes an unconstitutional bill, the people will say, "Whoa, let's vote that guy out of office. Don't take away my rights." An enlightened citizenry is indispensable for the proper functioning of a republic. I know no safe depositary of the ultimate powers of society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it away from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. Wow, what a good way to put it. Educate the people on their constitutional rights, and our problems are slowly remedied over time. Jefferson also said, "Now a government is like everything else. To preserve it, we must love it." Everything therefore depends on establishing this love in a republic, and to inspire it ought to be the principal business of education. But the surest way of instilling it into children is for parents to set them an example. And notice how Jefferson called America a republic, not a democracy. I am so tired of hearing our modern politicians calling America a democracy. It was set up to be a republic because our founders absolutely disagreed with democracies. In a democracy, any law can be passed as long as the majority of the people want it. The opinion of the mob changes rapidly and is based on passions, not facts. In a republic, laws can only be passed if they strictly adhere to the supreme law of the land. And the people are able to choose representatives who will enact legislation on their behalf. In a democracy, it's mob rule. Our founders brilliantly built America to be a republic. They set up checks and balances in the Constitution, so no branch of government could overstep its very limited power. If any president decides to bypass Congress and started writing dozens of executive orders, then he would be acting more like a dictator than a president. Those checks and balances are there for a reason, and if any president ignores the Constitution because he thinks he's above it, then he should be removed from office. And if the president feels like he has to enact executive orders because Congress is doing nothing, then by all means, let's vote out every single member of Congress and vote in some new politicians who actually care about the Constitution and the American people. I've heard so many speeches where presidents and other politicians call America a democracy. If it were a democracy, it would have already collapsed. It had been observed that a pure democracy, if it were practicable, would be the most perfect government. Experience had proved that no position is more false than this. The ancient democracies in which the people themselves deliberated never possessed one good feature of government. Their very character was tyranny, their figure deformity. Many of our founding fathers were pastors and Bible scholars. They were greatly influenced by the Bible as they sought out methods for government. Hundreds of Bible verses either inspired the Constitution or at least parallel its general thoughts. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, we find that God prefers a republic. Moses told the Israelites to choose wise men and understanding and known among your tribes, to be leaders over small portions of the population, like the House of Representatives. Later, the Israelites revolted and demanded God give them a king. He warned them that monarchies lead to trouble, but they didn't listen because they were a stubborn people. God granted their wish because He loves us enough to give us choices. Some people think Israel was only a theocracy. God blessed them and governed in their affairs, but they were also a nation based on written laws, and they chose their own leaders to represent their tribes. In the same chapter in Deuteronomy, the judges are charged to hear the causes between your brethren and judge righteously between every man and his brother and the stranger that is with him. Ye shall not respect persons in judgment, but ye shall hear the small as well as the great. The Bill of Rights echoes these ideas of due process of law and equal protection of the laws. Some argue that a nation based on biblical values would limit the rights of people who are not Christians. That's not true. The Bible says the stranger also had the right for his cause to be heard in righteous judgment. The stranger could be from a different race, religion, or culture. He was still given equal protection under the law. That's because the Bible emphasizes an individual's character. It doesn't collectively lump people into categories based on race. Jesus Christ was no respecter of persons. He ministered to the Samaritan as well as the Jew. His own lineage held Israelites as well as Rahab from Jericho and Ruth from Moab. Our modern concept of racism doesn't exist in the Bible because of Acts 17:26. And hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth. I couldn't even list all the parallels between the Bible and the Constitution. Self-evident, absolute truths. The work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness. Second Amendment. He that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. Paying taxes. Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God's the things that are God's. 3 branches of government. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us. Our founders actually talked about using this verse for the judicial, legislative, and executive branches. The president's cabinet. Where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Private property ownership. Thou shalt not steal, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's house or anything that is thy neighbor's. The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. The Bible's packed with timeless, eternal truths that can help the lives of every individual and every nation. There are so many scriptures that contain so much common sense that even an atheist could hang them up on the walls of his home so his children could be taught to have good character. Undeniable truths are simply a benefit to every aspect of our lives, our schools, and our politics. We spend so much time focusing on the bad parts of our society and the wrong actions of our politicians that we forget to focus on the only things that make sense in this world. Sometimes after watching the news and hearing all the lies out of Washington, I have to just turn it off and go outside to my garden. I've actually put my hand in the dirt and grass to touch something that feels and is real. The political system in Washington is completely out of touch with reality and the lives of actual Americans. When I see my green beans growing and I look up at the clouds and I feel the sunlight in my face, I know it's real and it shows evidence of the Creator. When we read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence, we're saturating ourselves with light and eternal truths. This is the same way a Christian feels when they shut out the cares of this world and spend time in the Scriptures. It fills us with light, and the darkness of collectivism disappears. When you actually read the documents, the arguments against them seem so foolish and invalid. The very nature of the attributes of God is entirely focused on the individual. Freedom is having a choice. God created the very first man to have a choice on whether or not he would obey God or eat the forbidden fruit. God made us free moral agents, not robots. Salvation was God sending His only Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross and shed His blood and rise from the grave so that each individual could choose on his own to ask forgiveness of his sins from the Savior. Salvation is for each individual soul, and God wants a personal relationship with each individual person who has ever lived. Only one individual can change the course of history. One individual can wake people out of the coma that collectivism has induced. You can make a difference. There are many politicians, professors, educators, and people with power and wealth who actually know what collectivism is and where it came from. So many people want to fundamentally transform America into socialism on the road to communism. We have to stand against it at all cost. Their motives for tearing down our foundation are varied. Some of them think the average person is too unintelligent to set his own course. Or they think the animals are more important and humans are getting in the way of their forward evolution. Or they don't believe in absolute truth or eternal principles, because then they would have to put moral restraints on their own personal lives. Or they have a quest for more power. Collectivism or individualism? Which one is better? Which mentality allows man to be truly free? Free to be an entrepreneur. Free to raise his family and worship God as he sees fit, or not to worship God. Free to have ideas and opinions. The answer goes without saying. The longing for individual freedom is universal in every man. It's self-evident. Here's a list of actions you can take to restore individual freedom to America. One person makes all the difference in the world. Look for every opportunity to teach your children about history, biblical morality, and how to be self-reliant. Be willing to take a stand, to pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Put your money where your mouth is. I just turned down an application for government aid to pay for one of my dental procedures. It was worth $4,000 to me to stand for my principles of limited government and handouts only for those who are actually truly in need. Run for public offices such as school boards, or at least attend the local meetings where you can meet and talk to officials. Call or email your congressman often to let them know your concerns. Vote values and principles, not politics or parties or free stuff. Be the best citizen, Christian, parent, employee that you can be. Be a hero. Be a leader. Be your own first responder. Look for the light. Call evil, evil. Call good, good. And teach your kids to know the difference. Seek to live so that you feel clean inside. Stay informed on current issues on the local and national level. We need to fight even for our enemies' right to free speech. And it's so important that we love our enemies. Because truly they're not our enemies. They're our fellow Americans. They're our brothers. No voice should be silenced. As Abraham Lincoln said, during a time when our nation was just as divided as it is now, with malice toward none, with charity for all. If you try to hate and silence your enemies, then you become the dictator you always hated. We have to love our enemies and reach out with random acts of kindness to our fellow man. It's time to put politics aside when it comes to loving our neighbor. Pray for our leaders. I exhort, therefore, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. And last of all, share this video with others. Tell them about the evils of collectivism. Not to speak is to speak. It doesn't matter who the president is or which party's in control. Both parties have failed the American people with their failed policies. Both parties have given in to collectivism and have allowed themselves to be ruled by corporations and large donors. I think every American would say that the platforms of both of the political parties don't align with the real values of America. There are only a few honest men in Congress. It's time to vote in some politicians who have principles, who have a backbone and are willing to stand for the Constitution. It's time for Americans to put aside our parties and our politics and unite on the common principles that we have. Principles like freedom of speech, freedom to peaceably assemble, freedom of the press. As much as the politicians and the media have tried to divide us, I still believe that in our hearts there are more principles that unite us than divide us. You could watch this video long after the current administration is passed, and this message will still ring clear. The message will always be the same. Do we want individual freedom or collective slavery? Take courage. You are the watchman on the wall. Spread the truth. Live the truth. Do not be silenced out of fear. Future generations will thank you. They're depending on you. We are the new breed of patriots. The line is drawn in the sand. Are you with us? If you're not ready to pass this DVD or link on to someone else, if you give in to collectivist and say, I'm just one person, I can't change anything, it's too big, it's too late, it's not worth a fight, it's not directly affecting my family yet, so I won't fight it. To that, all I have to say is this. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains or slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Please visit our blog, thetruthисselfevident.blogspot.com. On the blog, you'll find links to amazing YouTube videos that confirm the information in this video. Hear the people in their own words. You'll also find links to do your own research. and ways where you can read the articles for yourself. Connect and share the video with others. And you can also contact me, the author.